This happened a few days ago, and I'm still pretty shaken up about it. I only just thought to post it, so here goes. On Friday afternoon, I got a call from my friend named Sarah, asking if I wanted to meet her and another friend named Lisa at Dunkin' Donuts, as we hadn't seen one another in quite a while. Dunkin' Donuts is a 15-minute walk from my house, so I decided I would walk. Besides, the weather was fine. I got to Dunkin' Donuts and found where Sarah and Lisa were sat and went to join them. As we were chatting, I noticed that my sister Elena was sat at a table in the corner of the room with her friend Jess. For some context, my sister and her friend are both 18. My sister still lives with my parents, whereas I live alone. I excused myself from the table for a moment and went over to Elena and Jess's. They were sat at a table with 3 seats, so I sat down with them and said hi. They both jumped a little bit like they were really startled, but then looked more relieved than anything to see me. Immediately, Elena leaned in and whispered to me, "Don't look now, but that guy in the blue shirt, I think he's been following Jess and I." I glanced over and saw a middle-aged man sat at a table, facing slightly away from us. "He's walked past our table a good 5 times in the past 20 minutes to go to the bathroom, but he always walks slower when he passes by us," she continued. I told them they were most likely being paranoid, and there was nothing to worry about, but for their peace of mind, I offered to leave with them so they wouldn't feel as worried. I walked back over to my table and explained the situation to Sarah and Lisa. Both of them laughed it off and assumed my sister was just being paranoid. Literally, about a minute later though, I saw that same man get up from his seat and walk toward the bathroom. My eyes followed him, and sure enough, he walked extremely slowly past Elena and Jess. In fact, it was almost comical how obvious he became. Both of them looked in my direction, and I nodded to show them that now that I had seen him, I believed them. About 5 minutes later, I went to the toilets myself. On my way, I passed Elena and Jess and told them I was ready to go whenever they were. They both agreed that they wanted to leave right now. I told them I was going to go to the bathroom for a moment, and we could leave after I had done my business. Elena had come in her car, so she was going to give me a lift back. I went into the toilet stall, did my business, washed my hands. I was walking down the corridor back to the main eating area when Elena and Jess rushed into the corridor. I asked them what was wrong. They explained that another man had joined that strange creeper, and the men were both pointing and staring at them, so they rightfully felt unsafe. We walked back into the eating area. I put my money on our table and explained to Lisa and Sarah that I was taking off, and I would explain what was going on fully when we got home. We all got into Elena's car and left those creeps in the car's rearview mirror. After a 2-minute drive, we reached my house. Just then, I remembered that I had been meaning to return something I had borrowed from my mother, so I asked if Elena could drive me to my parents' house, as she was going there anyway. I jumped out of the car to get what I needed, when suddenly my phone rang. It was Elena. She explained that a car had just driven past and pulled into a driveway. She said the driver of the vehicle was that same creep from Dunkin' Donuts. I took a peek out my window, and sure enough, there was a car which didn't belong to the owner of the house, parked right on their driveway. I ushered the girls into my home and locked the door. I instructed Elena to take a photo of the car and its license plate, while telling Jess to call 911. She gave the operator more information than I could. Elena took the photos and we sort of gathered around Jess as she was speaking to the operator. She had finished telling the story, and I heard the operator assure us the police would be at my house soon. Just a few minutes later, there was a loud knock at the front door, followed by a loud voice shouting, "It's the police!" We all breathed a sigh of relief as I went to open the door. Jess told the operator the police were there and went to hang up. I was just in the process of unlocking the door when I thought to look through the peephole at the top. I peered through, but what I saw was not a police officer. It was the same man. I froze in fear and didn't know what to say. We didn't call the police," I managed to shout back at the man through the door. Elena and Jess were both very confused as to why I was doing this. We had a call, sir?" the man shouted back. "You must have the wrong address." I informed the girls it was the creep at the door and not an officer. Both were rightfully shocked and extremely scared, as was I. I was about to tell Jess to call the police again until I heard the sirens. The man began to panic. "Sir, you have to let me in right now." This time I didn't answer. He was pounding on the door. His commands for me to let him in turned into pleading and begging. I heard the police car pull up and some commotion outside. An actual officer then knocked on the door, and I let him in. And yes, I did check the peephole first. The police officers took the man into custody, while another police officer took Elena and Jess into the dining room for some brief questioning. I called my parents, and Jess called hers. Both were here extremely quickly once we told them what had happened. The man was found with a kitchen knife on his person and some other weapons in the car. Who knows what could have happened if I hadn't had the instinct to look through the peephole first. Both my sister and her friend are fine, although they are shaken up after the whole incident. So I, 20 and female, lived in a shady-as-hell apartment complex in an otherwise rich suburban area for 3 years, and I have a hell of a lot of stories that could fit here. But this one is about a neighbor I'll call Bob. A little bit of backstory. Me, 18 at the time, and my then 16-year-old sister used to babysit all of the neighborhood kids. These kids considered us their friends. It even got to the point where they seemed to have a radar of whenever me and my sister went outside. They'd come out and talk to us, and we'd let them ride our skateboards and such in the parking lot. The kids were all ages 8 through 13. So one day we were outside with them when we were suddenly joined by a stranger. He stood between us and our car, towering over us. He introduced himself and asked us to sign this petition he made up. We did, just being friendly. Then he asked us how old we were. I thought maybe he was a fellow teenager that perhaps looked just a bit older, or maybe he was just an awkward adult, so I told him I was 18. Of course, the very next question was if I wanted to go out with him, right in front of my mom and the other kids' moms as well. I awkwardly declined, but he continued talking about how he thought me and my sister were in middle school. Apparently, he was also 28. Eventually, he just kind of wandered away and asked someone else to sign his petition. A few days later, he knocked at our door after asking the neighbor for the address. He had a bag of what he said was chicken and wanted us to go eat it with him at the park. We declined and said we had schoolwork to do. He walked away, mumbling and grumbling about how antisocial everyone was. Later, we looked out our window and saw him playing baseball with 2 small girls. He kept physically moving their arms to different positions, even though they were clearly shrugging away from him. The next day, one of the little kids runs right up to me. I'll call her Maddie. She was 8. She had just gotten a new pair of Heelys and wanted to show off and have me help her with them. I was holding her hand and guiding her along when Bob appeared and said he could help better. Maddie said no, but he insisted. He actually pushed me out of the way and reached for Maddie, holding her tightly around the upper chest area. Her grandma was there too, and flipped out. He just sort of meandered away. The next day, Maddie was freaking out, saying Bob had been sitting on her porch when she left for school that morning. Her parents found out, and as they walked outside, he let himself in. He went into their kitchen and started making orange chicken. We later found out another neighbor had a similar story as well. Another time, we were helping a family move. They had a 2-year-old son. The garages are in a triangle shape to the road, almost like a roundabout. There's a flat patch of grass behind them. Well, here comes Bob to help us. He criticized the way we packed things and didn't help until our neighbor politely asked him to leave. Well, he left the garage, but instead of actually leaving, he asked the 2-year-old if he wanted to go off and play. When the kid said no, it made him angry. He picked up the kid to play, and the kid slapped him. He asked if the kid wanted to go behind the garages now. The kid's mom hadn't noticed yet, so I went with them and guided the kid back to his mom. The climax of this story is when my sister and I went on a walk with our 17-year-old friend and her other friend. Maddie ran up to us and wanted to come along. So here we are, starting our walk when Bob comes out. He sees our friend and immediately asks how old she is and how much she weighs because she's so skinny. He asks where we're going, too. My friend tells him we're going for ice cream on a girls' trip. He got real mad and stomped away. We continued our walk, but halfway through, I got this weird feeling, so I looked behind us. Bob is sprinting towards us. He yells at us for hiding from him, while also telling Maddie how pretty she is. An older neighbor saw this and immediately asked what was going on. He told the man we were being mean, and he needed to go write a song about us or something. He left, but later we saw him sitting at the park. When he saw us, he instantly came running again. We stop, and he asks us which one of us is over 18. Maddie's dad was there at this point and told him we weren't interested in him. He exploded, telling the dad to fuck himself and various other rude things and expletives, also calling me a bitch. Maddie was crying, and the neighbor who saw us before rushed over to check on us since he'd seen Bob running. Bob went inside muttering to himself. For a few weeks, we didn't see him. A single dad and his 5-year-old daughter moved in, and we were introducing ourselves to them. My mom kind of tipped him off that there was someone in our building who was a little bit off, especially around Maddie. The dad said he'd seen someone like that giving candy to kids at the pool while they seemed uncomfortable. Here comes Bob as if on cue. He immediately tells the girl in front of her dad that she looks like a movie star and how pretty she is. He asks to take her off and play with her, but the dad says no, of course, and they go inside. Turns out they were next-door neighbors. We still didn't see him much, but the other neighbors were telling us all kinds of horrible stories about him. There was a woman who was alone most of the day with her 2 kids under 5, who told us he stared and watched her whenever she went to and from her car. Maddie's parents continued to see him watching her, too. Then one day, again, we're babysitting, and here he comes, only this time he's swinging some nunchucks. Maddie screamed and hid in our car. He strolls over, nunchucks in hand, and starts talking to us all casual, but then he starts looking around. Where's Maddie? We told him she wasn't here, and he seemed to walk away. By then, most of the kids were afraid to go outside whenever they saw him. He had a habit of wandering around the complex. We could tell by his height and lanky gait. A few times, we'd see Bob with his dad. Those times, neither even glanced at us. Then one day, he just stopped showing up. We'd still see his dad and brother come in and out all the time, but we'd never see him. We only saw him again a year later, and it was only for one day near Christmas. Then he disappeared altogether. I really don't know what happened to him, but it was just one of those weird experiences with neighbors in the 3 years we lived there. Maybe I'll post the stories of a chick that wanted to kill her parents because she was a witch, or the old man that bit children next, if you want to hear them. Okay, so I have quite a few crazy stories. I'm not sure why, but a lot of crazy stuff has happened to me in the past. But this experience is one that I really don't like to talk about. It's just very unsettling and uncomfortable, but I feel like sharing it might do some good. So, let me begin. Okay, so for starters, if you don't know what Club Penguin is, it was a virtual world where you played as a penguin. You could chat with people from all over the world, customize your penguin, including changing its color, buying its clothes, decorating its house, play games, do missions, and you even had pets you could take care of. It was actually a pretty cool game, but definitely not as safe for kids as its advertisements made it out to be. Now don't get me wrong, it had chat filters, loads of warnings on the site about not sharing personal info, reporting and blocking options, and all that good safety jazz. And of course, there was also an age limit. But with all that being said, I'll never understand how people develop games like this and think that everything is going to be just peachy. Kids are not stupid. They know how to get around safety features, and more importantly, adults know how to take advantage of it as well. This is a story of how I was taken advantage of by an adult posing as a child on Club Penguin. Obviously, I was very young when all this happened. I don't remember exact digits, but I want to say I was about 7 or 8 years old. I had this very basic Club Penguin account with a random name, and I had lots of friends on there. I was a bit of a loner in school, only having about 1 or 2 friends that weren't even in most of my classes. Like most kids, I made up for this lack of socialization online. I tried to make friends with anyone I could that I found interesting. Well, one day, I met this black penguin. He had a pretty generic name like Cool Dude or something with a bunch of numbers after it. He was really interesting though. He said he was my age and then he liked a lot of the same things I did. We'd often spend time shopping for our penguins together or decorating our igloo houses while chatting up a storm about anything. TV shows, books, music, school. We talked for about 2 weeks, and eventually I told him my first name. Stupid, I know. After I told him my name, he asked me if I had a phone or if I had a Facebook. At the time, I didn't, so he said we could just keep talking on Club Penguin instead. Over time, though, I eventually stopped going online as often, and he'd tell me he missed talking to me whenever I came on. Lots of things like that. Eventually, there was a time period where I didn't get on for almost 2 weeks or so. I should mention that at the time, being so young, I didn't write emails or even check my email, so my parents and my older brother kept track of it for me. Well, one day, my brother discovered that a guy was emailing me and asked who this guy was. I looked at the emails and recognized the username as the same one the boy had had on his Club Penguin account. I told my brother he was a friend of mine I'd met on Club Penguin. He said I shouldn't be giving out my email like that because I didn't know who this person could really be. I tried to tell my brother that I hadn't ever given out my email to anyone, but he didn't believe me at the time and just told me it was okay but not to do it again. He then blocked the man's email. I logged on to Club Penguin the next day, and the boy never mentioned the email, so neither did I. We just hung out and chatted like always. Another week went by. My brother came in my room to check my computer like he always did, but this time was different. My brother immediately got quite tense and told me to leave the room for some reason, and told me to go get my mom as well. Later in life, I found out this boy was not a boy at all, but a man in his 30s or 40s. My parents believe he had hacked my Club Penguin account to get my email so he could start sending me nude photos of himself. My inbox was flooded with pictures of him fully exposed and messages saying that he loved me and he wanted to find me in person. I felt violated when I found out, and to this day it still bothers me to even think about it. I have lots of creepy encounters during my travels, but I'll start with the most recent one. This is fairly long, as I have 2 creepy encounters, one right after the other. For clarification, I'm Asian with very distinct Asian features. 5 foot 1 inches small and in my 20s. Last year, I went to Egypt with a big group of about 40 people. For one night, we stayed at this beautiful villa-styled hotel right on top of the mountains. The layout for this particular hotel is there was a very long pool in the middle, surrounded by small villas with about 20 rooms per villa. Our group got assigned to the furthest one from the lobby. It was around 10 p.m. when I decided to go out for a walk to watch the stars and all. My grandma, who I was sharing the room with, was very tired, so she went to sleep early and I went out by myself. I walked around the pool, enjoyed the weather and the stars, and sat on one of the benches by the poolside. It was then that I noticed one of the hotel staff, a bag porter who had helped with our luggage when we checked in, approaching me. I thought nothing of it, but he came by and made small talk. I attributed this to him trying to be friendly and courteous to the guests. He asked where we came from, and I answered quite politely. What he said next gave me the creeps though. He said his friend was actually looking for a wife from my country. Okay, dude." I laughed it off and lied that I was married. He asked where my husband was. I kinda panicked and told him my non-existent husband got left behind because he had to work. Immediately, he took out his phone to call someone, but I guess the person he was calling was not picking up. He told me to wait there, but my spidey senses were tingling on overdrive. I had two options: walk back to the villa as quickly as possible but risk letting this man know the room where I was staying at with my grandma, or walk toward the well-lighted lobby area hoping there were people from my group still there. I stood up and started to walk quite quickly to the lobby. The man was still trying to reach someone on his phone and tried to call after me, but I waved goodbye and hurried off. When I got to the lobby, I was relieved to see our tour leader, our Egyptian tour guide, and 3 ladies from our group still there. No more creepy hotel staff, or so I thought. In the hotel lobby, they had a bunch of souvenir shops set up. One of the ladies I was close with, B, was browsing inside the papyrus souvenir shop. Our guide warned us beforehand that the papyrus painting they sell at this hotel is a fake, or generally just a low-quality tourist trap souvenir, so I went inside the shop to tell B about that, just in case she forgot. Inside were me and 2 salesmen, as well as B. One of them was standing near the door and blocking the only means of exit. B asked for my opinion between 2 paintings, and the salesman in front of us told us that these paintings had a different pattern show up that glows in the dark. He asked us if we wanted to see it. I firmly said no before anyone else could answer. I had had enough for the day and just wanted to go back to our room. However, this persistent salesman said something to this other man standing behind us, who then proceeded to close the door and turn off the lights. Fuck. Maybe I'm just paranoid, but I really did not like the idea of being in the pitch dark with 2 men I did not know. I could also sense B was starting to panic as well, and she grabbed onto my wrist. Like an angel in disguise, though, the door suddenly opened from the outside. It was B's aunt who had been in the lobby with our tour guide. She shouted at us and asked what we were doing, then motioned for us to come out quickly. I swear, I don't know what they would have done if B's aunt didn't open the door at that time. She made a fuss over it, and the rest of the group walked back to the villa together with our tour leader. On the way back, B's aunt asked us if anything had happened. If our phones and wallets were still with us, all that jazz. We checked our belongings and everything was still fine. No one followed us back to the villa, so I was happy that we were also checking out the next morning. This is not meant to generalize or talk ill of a country, by the way. It just happened to happen in Egypt. It doesn't mean that Egyptians are creepy, but these hotel staff we encountered, regardless of nationality, acted very creepy and unprofessional. It didn't matter which country they're from. Their actions are what led me to say I'd rather not meet them again. Hello. For context, I'm a 28-year-old blonde woman, and I look around 18 to 22 or so I'm told. I recently went back to college for human resources, so I was on the GO train at 1 p.m. on a Monday to get to a 3 p.m. class. The train comes from outside the city, and it's super dead during the day when it's not rush hour. I hop onto this train and walked upstairs, but decided to go to the middle area. There's a middle area right next to a bathroom, because someone was humming and I thought it was quite annoying. The washroom door was closed the whole time. I didn't think anyone was in there. I was alone in this middle area with no one around me. I'm sitting with my jacket off, drinking tea out of a bunny mug with my backpack right across from me. I was completely comfortable because the GO train is typically a very calm ride. All of a sudden, though, a man pops out of the bathroom after about 5 minutes of me just sitting there. He was around 22 years old and had white fine-line scars in the shape of a heart and a 3D cube on his face. He put his hands on my backpack. I assumed he was going to try to mug me. I thought I was going to punch him in the throat and run because this wasn't my first attempted mugging, and I've never been successfully mugged. My body froze though, because his first words were, "I'm gonna kill my father tonight, and I'm gonna make you help me." He obviously didn't want my debit card. He wanted to hurt me. I currently work in mental health, and I'm used to working with people with homicidal thoughts. I don't scare easily when someone says their voices say to kill me, because I feel like I have all the resources I need and the rapport with my own people. I didn't know this man though. Immediately, I knew this wasn't just thoughts or a case of being lonely and talking to random strangers. He was not seeking help from me. I knew I needed to leave, but he moved his legs to block me in. I heard my voice shaking as I said, "It sounds like you're going through a lot right now. I'm sorry to hear you're upset with your dad. Why don't you tell me about it?" I grabbed my backpack. I knew I looked terrified because I just knew this was not good. "No, you're fucking not. Because women like you fucking sleep with my dad, you filthy bitch." He gets closer and corners me into the seat. He says he's gonna force me to help him kill his dad with a knife tonight because he's pretty tired of a woman like me, always ignoring him but fucking his dad. He keeps asking me why I do stuff like that. I felt terrified. I realized we were only 2 feet away from the washroom. I was scared he was going to try and make me go in there. My body was just frozen. His face gets right up into mine. I scream at the top of my lungs for help. Honestly, I didn't even recognize my own voice. I sounded so terrified. Luckily, 4 random people from the train came running to help. 1 man, 2 young women, and 1 middle-aged woman. The man immediately said, "Are you okay, miss?" The guy across from me put his legs down. He starts saying I'm screaming and calling for help because I'm a vain woman. We're all vain and cruel, and all I want is someone pretty, not like him, as he motions to his scars. I bolted upstairs with the help from the others, and I couldn't even talk for a full minute. My hands were shaking. I'd been in some scary situations before, but I was completely comfortable with this commute, not on guard like I am at work. The guy who came to help me saw the guy was getting even more mad and still yelling. I honestly don't remember what. He told me to run toward the customer service train, and he'd make sure the guy didn't follow me. We pressed the yellow security strip before I got up and went. The train started beeping, but there was no security to come. The guy who came to help me found me later when the train stopped. He told me he had strolled off the train like nothing happened. The 2 young girls who came with me had their phones though and took a lot of pictures of him walking away and gave them to the police. I walked to the customer service train. The police came, but the man was already long gone. They talked to me for a few minutes and said they knew who he was because of the scars on his face. He had apparently done something similar yesterday, and they thought he had severe mental issues, as if it didn't matter what happened. In all honesty, the police officer didn't seem very interested in talking to me. They asked if I saw his knife. I said no, but it didn't surprise me. The way he spoke had been the confidence of a man with a weapon. They obviously didn't care what I thought he could have had. They explained he had slapped another woman on the train, and someone even saw him pull a knife out at some point. Someone called the cops before we even pressed the emergency strip, but the customer service train guy didn't know that. He only knew my story because no one else pressed it and I came running to him. I just want to say that someone with mental illness can be homicidal, but it's not necessarily a symptom of who they are as a person. It's just a sign of how unwell they are in that moment. Not all people with mental illness have homicidal thoughts or are violent at all. I know very kind and wonderful people who have homicidal thoughts sometimes when they go through big life transitions. Those kind of people are not the ones that scare me. Maybe this man might have had some mental issues, but this guy scared me to my bones, and I'm glad the people came running to help me when I called for help. My gut tells me he would have done something horrible to me if I hadn't started screaming. I sincerely hope if he had mental health issues that they took him to a hospital, so he's not just around roaming free. The worst part is I saw a young lady around 18 years old crying on the train the next day. I overheard her saying she cried and hid in the washroom the entire train ride because a man had scared her when she got on, and she had to call her parents to come pick her up. I had no clue if it's the same guy, but I felt like it was probable, and it bothers me that he's bothering any woman. but especially young girls who might be too scared to know to scream. It's been a few months since then, and the police never contacted me on if they caught him. He never actually touched me, so I guess maybe to them it wasn't serious enough to look into. It made me permanently anxious on my commute though, and I never sit alone or take my jacket off anymore. I just never can really be comfortable on the train.